Good morning. Let's talk about the gender gap. No, not the one you're thinking about, not the wage gender gap that is a tired, boring conversation that has been beat to death. The horse has been beaten to death. They got a new horse. They beat that one to death. We're probably on our fifth horse at this point on the gender wage gap. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the gender gap when it comes to voting, because this has real, verifiable data on the differences between women and men and quite interesting facts around it. So first, on average, 10 million more women vote in every single presidential election than men. 10 million women. That is a staggering number. And it goes beyond that. On average, in each presidential election, there is a gender gap into which men are more likely to vote and which women are more likely to vote. Since 1980, women have leaned more Democratic on their presidential candidate, and men have leaned slightly more Republican. And on average, that comes around to what's called an 8-point scale. There's an 8-point difference. I'll simplify it down, and it's an 8% difference. But prior to that, when women initially got the vote in August 1920, they actually leaned more Republican. So women seem to favor, for instance, the early Republican candidates of the 1940s and 50s. They more favorably voted for Eisenhower, Dewey, and it wasn't until 1980 during the Reagan-Carter election that women suddenly shifted and in their majority voted for Carter. And this was a big change that political scientists noted at the time, and that change has continued. Why? There's all kinds of factors that political scientists continue to theorize. I won't go into it other than here are the data sets. These are the things that we can verify that indeed these trends are occurring. What are the causal factors for them? Everybody and their mother has an opinion on it. But it's interesting because not only did it change in 1980, what it's showing is that because women register to vote at slightly a higher level than men, and once they're registered, women vote more than men, really the presidential election is a woman's game. 10 million women are voting each election more than men. That means they can decide basically every election if they wanted to. If there was a calculated move about how to organize themselves around the Electoral College, just the voting rates that women turn out in, it puts men to shame. Men are not voting. And this follows every demographic trend. 18 to 24-year-olds, more women vote. 24 to 35-year-olds, more women vote. 35 to 45-year-olds, more women vote. 45 to 55-year-olds, more women vote. The only age demographic where more men vote than women is the 65 to 75 and above age demographic. And once again, you could speculate on why this is the one age demographic where more men vote than women. Now, granted, this is also the demographic where the most amount of people vote. Above 60% of people age 65 and above vote, which is phenomenal. I think that the average is something like 20 to 30% of 18 to 24-year-olds vote. So not only does the average of people voting get higher as they get older, but as you get right towards that end, the oldest demographic, then it suddenly switches. Then slightly more men vote than women. And I don't know if this is some sort of domestic nuclear family idea that was lodged, once again in the 1930s or when these women and men grew up. Many theories about this. It's futile to speculate. But that is the only age demographic where men vote more than women. All the rest, 65 and younger, women are turning out more than men. So what this means is that most elections are really a women's game, and quite staggeringly so. All right, so maybe you guys want to hear some interesting facts and figures. But so who is the least liked candidate by women, for instance, since 1980? Well, that goes to the three-way election that happened in 1992 between Ross Perot, George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr., and Bill Clinton. 38% of eligible women to vote voted for George H.W. Bush. So he was the least liked candidate by women. But the difference between men and women voting was actually almost zero because he was also the least liked candidate by men in 1992. 38% of eligible male voters also voted only for George H.W. Bush. So he was just disliked across the board in 1992. Now, interesting enough, You can go to the next election in 1996, where Ross Perot ran again as a third-party ticket, but this time it's Bob Dole and Bill Clinton, and here is when the gender gap splits wider. Again, only 38% of women voted for Bob Dole, the Republican, but 55% of women voted in plethora for Bill Clinton, whereas more men actually voted for Bob Dole than Bill Clinton in 96, believe it or not. More men, 45% of male voters voted for Bob Dole, and 44% of male voters voted for Bill Clinton in 1996. So, in fact, really you could argue that Bill Clinton was elected by women in 1996. Something to think about. And then I'm sure you're all curious, what was the gender gap between Trump and Hillary Clinton? Well, here it is. The 2016 election actually had the largest voting gender gap since they started recording it. It was 11 points. 54% of women voted for Hillary Clinton and 41% voted for Donald Trump. That's correct. 41% of women still voted for Donald Trump in this country. Whereas men, it was almost the exact inverse. 52% of men voted for Donald Trump, 41% of men voted for Hillary Clinton. You can see they basically swapped. 10% more women voted for Hillary Clinton, 10% more men voted for Donald Trump. But remember, 10 million more women vote in every election than men. So, food for thought, something maybe insightful that you didn't know, doesn't get discussed in the news very often, but it's definitely a real thing and has real consequences. If you found this video insightful, like, subscribe, curious to see what you guys' thoughts are down below. Click around for another video. I never embed them. Thanks for watching. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.